Ladies and gentlemen, happy May 2020. I hope everyone's having a doing well and safe in their quarantine space. Have the pleasure today to talking to my good friend Rahul, and we actually go way back, Rahul and I. He used to play in a band called Iris, and I used to play in a band called Cryptic Matter. We did a lot of shows together, especially in Baltimore. But now he's got his own solo project. I've got my own solo project. It's the month of May. It's Asian American Heritage Month, and then this is the first podcast that I'm doing for it. I want to highlight some of the Asian American artists around Baltimore and Maryland. So I'm so glad and happy to know my good friend Rahul. How are you doing, Rahul?
I'm doing pretty well, considering the COVID-19 has all locked up. But I think it's a great time, artists, musicians, painters, anything else, to really look deep into yourself and maybe create more art from this circumstance that you're in. And for me personally, it's working out really well. I have my work, so I'm very grateful that I still have work, and I have my art and music, so I can focus more on that. So it's going pretty well for me.
Yeah, that's right. Rahul's dropping some wisdom for us. So for all you out there that are just like sitting on the couch and watching Netflix, practice your art, practice your craft. But anyways, we'll get yeah, that's the strict Asian parenting bring like coming out of us, I guess. Okay.
That is true. That is true.
Don't sit around on the couch. But yeah, we're gonna talk about three songs today off of Rahul's album, and then let me scroll down how to pronounce it. Ma De Re Sha. Did I get that right?
Yeah, it's Ma De Re Sha, but yeah, that's good enough.
Yeah, we're gonna talk about Rahul's hot album that he dropped a few years ago. But I mean, luckily I've it's I'm not saying it just for the sake of, but it's one of my personal favorite guitar albums because like I'm like one of those guitar nerds like Rahul that listens to the Shrapnel Records stuff. But I'll stop blabbing. We'll talk about more. So Rahul, I've obviously I know a lot. I've listened to your music a lot, but I've heard your music described as Indo-fusion rock guitar, and this isn't really that familiar in the United States. For those that have no idea what Indo-fusion rock guitar is, can you describe it to the listeners out there?
Sure, absolutely. I'd love to. So, India has a rich heritage and tradition of their classical Indian music. It's broken up primarily into two sections. One is the North Indian, that we call Hindustani classical music, and one is the Carnatic, which is the South Indian classical music. And these are what most people generally would kind of relate to in terms of sitar, the tabla, the violin, everything that comes out from there. So in the 60s and 70s, there was a wonderful crossover of music happening with groups like Shakti, which is John McLaughlin, partnering with Zakir Hussain, and a lot of these artists just moving up and down. Beatles came and did fusion. So wonderful mixture of Western harmony with Indian sensibilities start to form, which is where the Indian or Indo-fusion things started to come from. Later in the years, you had Sean Lane, more recently, and most recently is like 20 years back, you had Prasanna, and now you have a ton of artists who are now bringing that culture more and more and fusing it well with the Western, rhythms and everything else. So I did the same thing. I have a background in metal. That's my upbringing. So I like rock and metal. And then I really did enjoy the fusion that I was hearing. So when I wanted to put out my album, I wanted to make sure that it was a good fusion of that. So you have tablas, you have interesting rhythmic patterns, but then you have more familiar to the Western ear, your Western harmony, your Western scales. But you have the Indian inflections, which you get from the sitar and the veena and other fretless instruments. So that was the Indian fusion aspect of the album, and that's kind of what I presented through the album.
Wow. Woohoo! What a great response. What a great response. That sounded really it was really thorough, and I think you just gave like the whole like history of Indo-fusion rock guitar in like a minute. So like bravo to you. And then I swear I have a like a Word document open where I took down notes, and then uh, like um I swear I'm not making this up, but I had written down like asking you about John McLaughlin and the Beatles later in the interview when we were talking about Train to Siliguri, because I noticed that had a John McLaughlin feel. I swear I have that on your notes, but it's cool that you like mentioned it just now, and then it's a foreshadow to later in the interview, and then I didn't know that about Sean Lane. But anyways, instead of just hearing it being described, let's play one of your tracks, which I think encompasses Indo-fusion rock guitar really well. It's called Baisakhi. Did I pronounce that correct?
Yep, that's exactly correct.
All right, so here it is. This is a pretty heavy rocking track. It's Baisakhi by Rahul. Oh man, what a great track that is. I especially love like the intro, how like you have the Middle Eastern flutes that set the vibe, and then but later it gets like really heavy and stuff, and then like I think like it's a great track to like introduce the listeners to like what Indo-fusion like rock guitar is, and then me personally as a guitarist, when I listen to that track, to me it sounds like a lot of Dream Theater like esque, like it's really like complex, but like it has Middle Eastern vibes to it. Of course, that's just my analysis of it. But since I'm talking to the actual author, can you tell me the, am I right, or what are your influences when you're coming up with this track?
Oh, absolutely. So you're right. Let me start with the first part of the song. So the flute is actually my ebow. So I use my ebow to emulate a flute sound to play that intro part of it, and then I used vocals that I had to overlay on that. The entire song itself is certainly Middle Eastern in its feel and its nature. One of the bands that really influenced me on that, actually a couple of bands. One is Orphan Land, which is this wonderful Middle Eastern band that you have to check out if you really like really heavy metal and
How do you
oriental
spell it?
music. Orphaned, Orphaned,
All
like
right.
an orphan, and then land as in any landmass. So the two separate words, and it's wonderful. Orphan Land also has a guitarist who eventually left them, called Yossi Sassi, um, Yossi. That's the first name, and the last name is Sassi. And he's this amazing multi instrumentalist who has also put out solo albums, and he plays the bouzouki, he plays the guitar, he plays multiple Middle Eastern instruments. So I'll listen to a lot of that, along with this band called Myrath, which came out around that time, who had this incredible album called Sands of Time, if I'm saying that correctly. And they were able to fuse this kind of music, which is interesting because I was playing around with Middle Eastern percussion rhythms at the same time. So I basically channeled that vibe and went straight into it. But obviously, I had my music and my influences are heavier, so I went with, as you rightly probably said, John Petrucci is a massive favorite of mine. So I channeled the Dream Theater vibe to make it super heavy and super groovy. And yeah, it's actually one of the more popular tracks of the album, so I'm really glad you enjoyed it.
Yeah. Awesome. Awesome. And then in the last minute, Rahul just dropped a lot of artists and bands that we should check out. So as part of Asian American Heritage Month, you know, once this is posted, we should all rewind and then maybe put some of those artists that you like mentioned on our playlist. And then well oh yeah, my what does Baisakhi mean?
So Baisakhi is a kind of a storm in India, and it's generally around the monsoon season where you have this really intense storm that comes through. Or at least that's the way I used to always feel about it when I was young, and these huge monsoons used to come, and I used to keep hearing the word Baisakhi. And it's like, what is Baisakhi? And sometimes people say it's a festival, sometimes people say it's a storm. And so when I was young, I used to always feel this intensity with that word. And for some reason, when I created this song, that's the word that just sprung to my mind. And it felt right. So it came from emotion, it came from a place which kind of fueled that intensity. So I said, this should be the name. And so that's how the name for the song came about.
Yeah, well, that song, it certainly is storming. You know, it kind of like it starts off. Well, you actually fooled me with the ebo. I actually thought those were flutes. So that's some yeah. But it starts off with some mellow ebo, and then I guess that's like the calm before the storm, and then
Yes.
yeah, it suddenly hits you, and then with like heavy distortion and madness, and then where it's kind of coincidental, where well, not technically in a storm, but a pandemic, which is sort of a storm. So yeah, I guess that's kind of appropriate for May 2020. And then earlier you were talking about John Petrucci, guitar players. I'm a guitar player too, and then so um, we're gonna nerd out on some guitar in this next question. So if you don't play guitar, you can tune out. No, just kidding. Keep listening. Keep listening. Okay, so as I said, when I was listening to your song, I noticed like it uses the harmonic minor scale a lot, and then to give it that Middle Eastern sound. Now, I like shred guitar. I know you like shred guitar, and then if you know the history of shred guitar, for a long time, rock guitar in the U.S. it was blues based, but the 80 heavy metal shredders they wanted to kind of expand beyond that, and then so you had guys like Yngwie Malmsteen, Paul Gilbert experimenting with classical music and rock music, and then later you had like guys like Marty Friedman, experimenting with Middle Eastern scales and into rock guitar, and then guys like Joe Satriani, like using Maxillian modes and stuff and Phrygian modes to give it that exotic feel. But I'm just wondering, you like in your song as a guitar player, Rahul, when getting that Middle Eastern vibe in that song, did you like first hear it from those 80s metal shredders, or like did you listen to it like straight like from the source from like Middle Eastern like music, and you're like, oh hey, these like 80s metal shredders are like doing it, so like I can do it too, and then like I've got this straight from the source. So tell me about that.
So that's a great question. And I think it's an interesting answer because my childhood, I was born and raised in India, so I've been listening to Indian music for a very long time, even though I didn't really particularly take to it. But it's a song that you know, the tunes you grow up with. So in India, you have a lot of microtonal playing, a lot of the inflections, a lot of interesting double harmonic major modes, harmonic minor modes, and the ragas in particular have their own really distinct flavor. And then a lot of that has a crossover with the Middle Eastern scales, the Hijaz and everything else, which have microtones and a certain style of playing. So I've always had that at the back of my head, whether I knew it or not. And then later, when I started to listen to a lot of shred guitar, like you said, um, definitely Shakti, John McLaughlin, Mahavishnu Orchestra, a lot of the fusion players at that time were using a lot of these, what I'm going to just term as exotic scales and exotic modes, to really bring out interesting fusion flavors. Malmsteen certainly has his own distinct style, but I gravitated certainly more towards Marty Friedman, which you mentioned, who's an insanely great player, especially his early work with Megadeth, and then Jason Becker, who did some amazing stuff as well. So I pulled a lot of that influences, and then as I matured as a musician, and I started to learn a little more about what are the different scales, the modes, what can I do to make my songwriting more interesting, not just use blues-based patterns and pentatonics. I started to explore more of these. And it's interesting that as a musician, when I jam, I tend to start to play some of these exotic patterns because it's somewhere in my brain has been ingrained that this note would actually sound decent or sounds good and sounds different from everybody else if you play it this way. So that's how I started to really imbibe the different fields, whether it's Middle Eastern, whether it's Asian. So my little melting pot of guitar licks is based off my childhood and then listening to shred guitar players later in my years.
Yeah, what a great answer. I guess answer is both. Both is right. That as a guitar player, I guess from a guitar perspective, you did pick it up from the 80s shredder, but they ignited the seed that was planted in you from growing up from India. So this is a great answer. And then, but what get this, guys. One thing that Rahul does that the 80 metal shredders I don't see doing is they just incorporate it from a melodic standpoint, like, oh, let me use the scale, but I like Rahul. I like the way you integrate like the rhythms and the tablas in with heavy metal music. And then I've seen a Facebook post that you posted before. How I guess it was before producing your album. How now I might be wrong, but you said you always like the way that tablas sound with heavy distorted guitars.
That is true. So I've always enjoyed the sound of tablas. I think it's really unique. In a sense, it has its own voice, and it's very distinct. Like the minute you hear it, you know exactly what you're listening to. And tablas have always had complex rhythms, which makes it really interesting as a musician. Because when you're growing up and you listen to a lot of the pop, R&B, you know, general radio music, a lot of it is purely 4/4. And you listen to a little more jazz, and you understand, okay, so they're playing 6/8, they're playing 5/4s. And then you listen to Indian music and fusion, and you realize they have this insane vocabulary of playing in 17s and 72s, and numbers you can't really fathom as a musician. And they play it with absolute ease. And then you really go into progressive music, and progressive music pulls from the same tradition of pushing the boundaries and really going out there. King Crimson is certainly a name that comes to mind when you want to talk about crazy music. But for me, with the heavy metal and tablas, I found that to be a really interesting combination. And this came out of pure experimentation, is how I'd like to put it, because I was playing really heavy riffs and I wanted it to be different. I wanted it to be distinct so that when people heard my stuff, they'd be, okay, that's a person who has a unique sound. So I wanted to really carve a niche for myself. And I was just experimenting, and I pulled in a tabla loop, and it actually fit. And it was interesting because till that point, I'd never heard really heavy metal music with tablas. I'd heard fusion, which is John McLaughlin running his overdrive over tablas. Sounds great. Sean Lane playing really overdriven stuff. Jonas Hellborg playing his bass with a little bit of overdrive on tablas, ghatam. Sounds great. But really, having heavy riffs played on tablas, I'd never really heard till that point. So I said, why not? Why not take this concept and see if it works out? And to my advantage and my luck, I guess, it really did. And not to say I've captured the market on that, but it's certainly a sound that is now associated with my name. So I kind of like that piece of it.
Yeah. All right. All right. So for all you listeners out there, especially you metalheads, if you want to hear how tabla can be incorporated with heavy metal distorted guitar, picked up Rahul's music album, Ma De Re Sha. You can certainly hear a lot of tablas, a lot of heavy, kick-ass shredding guitar work. So you can hear from listening to the album that heavy metal, when people think of heavy metal as drums, they just think of like the kick drum, like machine gun type rhythms. But with the tabla added, you can add a lot of interesting rhythms. And if you want to listen to example, just pick up Rahul's album. And speaking of tablas, this next song also has tablas in it. It doesn't have distorted guitar in it. It's more laid back. So the storm is over, so we're just gonna chillax for the rest of the interview. So this next song, it's more of a mellow song. It certainly has, this time it has clean guitars and tablas in it. And I am now going to play for you Train from Siliguri. Did I pronounce that right?
Yeah, Train Ride from Siliguri. That is correct.
All right, let's listen to Train from Siliguri. What an awesome track! A nice contrast from the last track before, but definitely a great track. Train from Siliguri. So, Rahul, were you actually riding on a train from Siliguri when you wrote that song?
Not really. But so the reason I came up with the title track is one, just the rhythms and the tabla. It's definitely a more laid back track, and it reminded me of the train rides I used to take when I was a young child back in India. As you know, people in the 80s and 90s, trains were generally the most viable transportation. Airlines were really not, uh, that viable for us. So I did a lot of traveling through trains, and the train in India has this wonderful rhythmic motion that most Indians will easily relate to. And when listening to the tablas play and playing the guitar over it, it really reminded me of that rhythm and that feel. So it's inspired by the train ride that I took as a kid. The name Siliguri I picked up is just a city in the northeast state of West Bengal. I'm Bengali, so I just happened to, put the Siliguri name along with it. It just felt right for some reason. That name just came to me. So I was like, okay, that's a train ride. It has a train feeling, and then the name Siliguri just came. So I said, okay, I'm gonna put those two together, and that's how the song is named.
All right, awesome. Nothing wrong with not everything in music has to be true, but it is based on a childhood experience. Rahul, you should have lied and said I am from Siliguri. No, I was just kidding, just messing with you. Yeah, but I guess it's kind of interesting. You wrote this song based on the rhythmic patterns of a train. Well, I don't know how the trains rhythm is like in India, but if you want to find out, you should listen to this. You should download Rahul's song "Train from Siliguri" if you never rode a train in India. I just think it's kind of interesting that because I'm from Texas, so I listen to a lot of folk and country music, and then trains is definitely a theme in country and folk, bluegrass and blues music too. Like you have Folsom Prison Blues by Johnny Cash, Freight Train by Elizabeth Cotton, and then in country and folk music in the United States, the train in that music, it's usually a metaphor of the journey that you're taking down in life, what the future ahead holds for you. But I guess but Rahul, you've made this train not just an Americana thing, but in music, but it's now international.
Yeah, true. Yeah, definitely. So I think transportation and uh, things are really popular in the South. I know the South has a lot of songs about their trucks and their cars, trains certainly. So it's interesting that you made that analogy. I'd never thought of it. Now that I do, it's a really interesting, I guess, cross pollination of how different people have the same experiences and how they write about it. So that's certainly interesting to me now.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Cross pollination, fusion. That's the theme of the interview for today. Fusion. We're linking India to Johnny Cash through Rahul. So, yeah, I'm gonna talk about as a guitarist. When I was listening to a train from Siliguri, to me it has a strong John McLaughlin feel to it. Am I correct?
Certainly. So the interesting thing about Train Rush and Siliguri is that, and you probably appreciate this as a guitarist, it's played on a very differently tuned guitar. There is an interesting story behind the tuning. So there was a certain night, I think this was probably in 2007, 2008, where I was bored of playing the same licks. So I started to randomly just tune the pegs without looking at any tune or anything else. Till I found a chord or a sound that I really liked. So I just kept playing with it and tuning different pegs till I suddenly reached a tuning. And I stuck with it. So then I figured out what the tuning was. I put a tuner on, and I'd never seen this tuning anywhere before. It's not a DAD tuning. It's not an open G. It's not open E. It's none of those things. It's just a random guy who picked a random set of tuning pegs and tuned them, and has a really nice open sound to it, which is what you hear at the beginning of the song. And the entire track is basically a 1 chord and a 5 chord, and that's what I think I was playing. So all the licks that come from it, I'm trying to really, so it's like a new instrument. So you're playing these really familiar patterns, but they have a very, very distinct outwardly kind of sound to it, which is a lot of what McLaughlin used to do, at least still does actually. And he does a lot of synthetic scales, lines that I've never heard someone do, and really mind-boggling harmony when he's playing over changes. So the Trainwreck song itself has a really interesting chord pattern, and then the licks I'm doing are interesting because they aren't standard pentatonic, they aren't standard blues, they aren't standard rock vocabulary. It's literally me experimenting and finding these new sounds as I play, because the intervals are different, the skips are different, so it has a very, very different vibe to it. And I'm really glad it does remind you of John McLaughlin, because he's a massive hero of mine. But yeah, that's the basis of the song.
All right. Wow, ladies and gentlemen, Rahul has came up with his own tuning for that song. Should definitely get it copyrighted, and then maybe decades down the road, we'll be calling it the Rahul tuning. Like, I'll say, hey man, what tuning is that? Is that drop D, open G, double drop, or is that the Rahul tuning? Maybe he'll share us what the Rahul tuning is, or maybe he'll keep it a secret. His sound's a secret, like a chef that keeps that secret recipe or ingredient hidden. Who knows? You'll have to follow Rahul on social media to find out. But speaking about John McLaughlin, and then had some more follow-up questions about that. So obviously in the West, in the United States, John McLaughlin is like a well-respected jazz guitarist that like we in the West know that's influenced by world music, especially Indian music. And then of course the Beatles is really popular in the West, and then like they're known as like they started off as a standard pop group, but then they went psychedelic and decided to experiment more, and then so they traveled to India, and then they experimented with Hinduism and sitars, and wow, what pioneers. And then so that's, we all know the perception of John McLaughlin and the Beatles here in the United States, but my question is, in India, what do they think of John McLaughlin and the Beatles like being influenced by Indian music? Like, is John McLaughlin popular in India? And then I guess some more also well, we know John McLaughlin's like well respected. Like the Beatles, like when they're going through their psychedelic like phase, like did people in India think, oh, like they should just like stick to their pop, or while they're really like experimenting, I appreciate how they're like bringing our culture to the world? Or are they like, oh well, those like damn hippies should just like stick to their Brit pop, and then they're like really like messing up our music? And then so was the perception of the Beatles and John McLaughlin in India?
So that's a really interesting, and I probably think it's a very divisive question, because just like the West, you have different factions in India who perceive music differently. So let me answer it this way. When I read about John McLaughlin and the Beatles and what they've done to Indian music, it's interesting because you have the purists who were very anti this. It's a very similar theme to what happened to Paco de Lucia when he tried to do fusion with John McLaughlin. The purists distanced themselves immediately from fusion because it was seen as a degradation of music. It was seen as violating the purity and the tradition of what it is. So there's certainly a faction in India that did not respect what Shakti, which is Zakir Hussain, John McLaughlin, were doing. They didn't like what Zakir was doing, so they kind of distanced themselves from him. They had a lot of derogatory things to say about that. Same for the Beatles. There's actually, I remember hearing on YouTube Pandit Nikhil Banerjee, who's a very, very well-respected sitar player, who said, it's interesting that people come here and they try to imbibe, some facets of our Indian music, but it's just that. It's more of a toy. It's not really taking our music and doing anything with it. And there's another whole different league of people who think it's fantastic. India was able to start, I guess, a new era of music where there's this kind of collaboration and it really opened new doors and new avenues for musicians to experiment with things. You have fans on both sides, actually. I have friends and family who love the Beatles, who love everything they've done, who enjoy the entire journey of the Beatles, right from their, hey, we're a 4-piece pop band, to some of the more interesting and out there music that they made eventually. The same goes for Shakti, the musicians, jazz fanatics who love everything John McLaughlin did. Whether it's the Shakti, Mahavishnu Orchestra, his thing with Miles, and there's a lot of respect for him. So on both sides of the coin, you have people who want to distance themselves, which is out here in the US or in the UK or in India, and then you have people who just adore that kind of music. So it's interesting. It's a very divisive question, but it certainly works out.
Yeah. Sorry. I wasn't trying to like start a fight, but like I just wanted to get like an insider perspective. But I guess it's a complex question, and then so it's a complex answer. But it was good you answered, because like I really had no idea like on it. So it was good to get like a inside scoop on that. And then so we are listening to Rahul, his album Ma De Re Sha. And then it's not just the name of his album, but it's also the name of his title track. So if you like the last song, Train, from Siliguri, you're gonna sure love Ma De Re Sha. It's another chillaxed song for you. If you don't like heavy metal out there, listeners, you should still buy Rahul's album, because there's a lot of chillax tracks on it. And if this chill stuff is boring you to death, you should still buy Rahul's album, because Baisakhi isn't the only hard-driven songs in there. There's also a lot of other hard stuff in there, like Exit 13, and then so I'm gonna play the title track to Rahul's album Ma De Re Sha, and then here it is. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we just heard the title track from Rahul's album, Ma De Re Sha. And so, can you tell me what that means?
Sure. And again, most songs on an album have some kind of history behind it. This one certainly does. So, back in the day, I have a friend of mine. She has a daughter, and the daughter at that point was 2 years old. And she learned this little word or phrase, Ma De Re Sha, and she would keep going around saying it wherever she went. And she would say it with a lot of passion behind it. And no one really knew what it meant. Her parents certainly didn't know where she picked it up. She wouldn't tell us what it meant, but she was very passionate about it. And I connected with that only because, well, one, because I really love that kid. You know, the kid is adorable. 2-year-olds are really adorable. And two, her saying Ma De Re Sha was a lot like me with my music. I will go talk about it, and I will try to promote it wherever I go. You know, so I'm passionate about it, and it's mine. It's mine to kind of just evangelize as such if I want to. So I connected with that a lot, and I was like, that is such a wonderful name. Also, it had, well, technically for everybody else, it had no meaning. But for her, it meant everything for her. Which is, again, a lot like my art is to me. You know, it may not mean a lot for anybody else, but it's my world. It means everything to me. So that name, Ma De Re Sha, became really synonymous with the way I was running my music and my artwork. And it was the perfect title for the album. It's something that's near and dear to me, and it's something that I'm very proud to say out in public. So when I was talking to my co-producer, Bruce, and we were discussing album names, and I had a whole list of them, when he finally came to this one, we both said, this is it. This is the name that has to be there for the album. It doesn't have any weird connotations. It doesn't tell you anything about what the music is going to be. It doesn't give you any preconceived notions. You just go into it and you experience it for yourself. And it's unique and it's interesting and it has a wonderful backstory. I did actually take permission from the parents to use that phrase from her, and they were more than happy that I would. And as it turns out, years later, when the little one's grown up, she's completely forgotten about Ma De Re Sha. She has no recollection, and we've never really found out what it really meant or how it came about. So that's the story.
Wow, wow, what an interesting history. So, what started off as just a baby like goo goo gaga language, we're just like, oh, it doesn't mean anything, but you gave it meaning, and then you gave it I guess it didn't have a definition or meaning now, but now it does. And then it's my next questions were how's this represent the whole album, but you sort of answered it because your answer to the last question was really great and comprehensive. Yeah. So anyways, since I don't know if you answered this question before, maybe you might have answered this part in the beginning of the interview, but I'll ask it again. And then now that we're all locked down, like what you've been doing in your quarantine? Are you like back at the woodshed trying to practice those chops, or maybe you're working on new music, or just chillaxing on the couch and watching Netflix? Can we get an insight into the quarantine life of Rahul?
Absolutely. So I actually do not lay on the couch. I haven't watched a single movie since the quarantine started, actually.
Woohoo, discipline.
The only thing I actually watch is my parents are here with me, and they're locked in here with me. They're visiting from India, so they've been stuck because they can't really go back. So I wanted them to watch The Lord of the Rings. So that's the only indulgence, I guess, TV-wise that I do. I spend a lot of my time doing music. So I'm working on the next album. I'm working on collaborations. I'm also studying a lot. And from studying, I mean, I'm collaborating with another Indian musician who's well versed with the ragas, the Carnatic kind. And he's been teaching me the different ragas and what are the do's and the don'ts in that. And then I take the raga, because Indian music doesn't really have harmony. Indian music is primarily based around rhythms and melody, and all you have is a little drone or the tanpura that just plays the fifth or the one, uh, the root note. That's all it does. But I've been able to take that and create chords, which are really weird sounding chords, and they have interesting names because they have a flat 13, sharp 11, and it's augmented in the weird way. But with all these kind of interesting sounds, you can make chords and you can make progressions. So that's what I've really spent my time doing. I'm making music and I'm really expanding my palette to gain more understanding of the ragas and make it different. Not just play a raga by itself, but make a chords vocabulary out of it. Use the chord vocabulary to play chords, make a progression, and then play over it, and maybe fuse other things into it. In fact, just before you had called, Tomeva, which is a band that I'm currently playing with, had an online virtual concert. The piece I played on that was based off a raga called Hamsanadam. And what I did in the raga was I created chords and I threw in a D major 7, which is technically not part of the chord family, which is from the raga. But it allows me to play a melodic minor, a harmonic minor, and blues along with the raga. So it really opens up the palette in terms of what you can do. So I'm certainly in the woodshed. I'm playing my favorite licks. I'm learning new licks. I'm certainly playing more music, and I'm recording a lot. And that's my hope for all the musicians and artists out there. I know this is a very trying time. I know there's huge challenges for most of us. A lot of us are struggling with mental keep up with this kind of circumstance. Some of us find it difficult because our employment is at risk. Some of us find it difficult because our inspiration is at risk. A lot of people I know get inspiration from interacting with humans and everything else. So a lot of people I know are really feeling confined. But my hope and my desire for most people is I really hope you're able to channel your emotions and this environment to something creative. No pressure, of course. You know, a lot of people need to deal with this place. You have different circumstances. But personally, I'm fortunate to be in the place I'm in, where I have the opportunity to create more artwork in this time. So yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. Yeah. Great insight into, not just your personal perspective, but a more like broader thing addressing the greater artistic community during this time. I can't. That the new stuff that you're working on certainly sounds really interesting. I can't wait to podcast you in May 2021 when you're hopefully done with this project, this new project you're working on. We can do another podcast on the stuff that you're just talking about now, and then a year from now I can say, hey, everyone referenced this podcast from a year ago. Or even better yet, we might be out of the quarantine, so I might have you I might do a live music showcase and showcase some of your new work, because originally this is supposed to be a live music showcase, but of course the COVID hit, and so now it's a podcast. But I don't know if in 2021 if I'll continue to do the podcast or maybe a live showcase, or maybe both, or who knows? Maybe it'll be a podcast. Maybe it'll be a live interview performance, and then I'll put on podcast form. There's so many options. So Rahul, thanks for calling in, and thanks for sharing your music with the rest of us. And then for all you all out there listening, go check out Rahul's music. So while I still have Rahul's on the line, Rahul, why don't you plug in any last minute things you want to say, or you can plug in where this is cliche, but where can we find your music? What social media platforms are you on?
Great question. So for everyone out there, my personal website is my last name, which is M as in Mary, U as in umbrella, K as in Kerry, E as in Edward, R as in Robert, J as in Jack, I as in India, U as in umbrella, S as in Sam. So Mukerji.us is my website. You can go there. I have my music right now on all the different platforms, CD Baby, Pandora, Amazon, but you can actually get it for free. You can have a digital download free of the entire album if you just go to the Bandcamp site. Look for my name, put the word Bandcamp after it. You can get my entire album for free. My last words for everyone out there who are artists: don't pressure yourself. There's a lot going on. I know the musicians and artists who are able to create work this time, the musician artists who are not able to because of the circumstances. Just relax. We're gonna get through this. It's just a phase. We'll get back together, and I'm really looking forward to being out there again with all the different artists and playing out. And who knows, maybe in 2021 you'll actually get to see an I Write in Cryptic Matter gig back in Baltimore, just like the old times. I'd love to see that.
I'd have to talk with the rest of the guys, but I think they're down with that.
Justin is, because I mentioned that to Justin. I told her I'm still listening to your album. I'm still listening to Race Car Driver. I still listen to Come Dance With Me. Those are my tracks. I still listen to that stuff. Can you believe it? It is that much of an impact to me.
Yeah.
And you know that we should love coming out to support you and playing out with you guys. So I'd love to, do it once again in 2021 and just take over Baltimore like we used to.
Yeah, I really appreciate that, Rahul. Unfortunately, I don't think we wrote any new songs since you last heard us, but it's glad that you like the old classics. So, ladies and gentlemen, we just spoke with Rahul and had a lovely conversation with my friend Rahul. And then, if you like what you heard, this is just one part of a 4-part series. So I have other artists lined up around the Baltimore, Maryland area. And then I'm going to interview all sorts of artists ranging from R&B, hip-hop, and I'm even interviewing myself. So please stay tuned throughout the month of May. I plan on releasing more podcasts of these, showcasing the wonderful Asian American musicians that we have in Maryland. Thank you, stay safe, and remember to fill up on your vitamin C, fluids, and your toilet paper. Thank you, and have a great day.